From dating to relationships, from sex to love, from Christianity to politics, from darkness to light, you have now entered into the real zone. Welcome to Conversations with Trent, where no topic of conversation is safe from discussion. Now, here he is, Mr. Epic himself, Trent Williams.
What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to another podcast with Conversation with Trent and Friends. We got a good one tonight. Actually, it's part two from last Wednesday. We had the good brother Rahme'el, one of our good friends, came through. We talked about where are the men, softly walking back into manhood. Had a great conversation. Got a few phone calls the same night that came. That show aired. And there's a lot of positive things and everything they were talking about. It was some good stuff, real good stuff. There were, rave reviews for the show. So Shann and I and the gang, we actually decided to do a part two and bring Brother Rahme'el back. So tonight, balancing our masculine and feminine energy. Let's bring the good folks in. Ladies.
Hey, good evening.
Hey there.
How's it going? We had a good one last Wednesday, man, as well as Sunday as well. But got a lot of calls on the one now where Brother Rahme'el was on, talking about the masculine energy and all that good stuff. So we brought it back to number two. So that's good stuff. Real good. So tonight's topic: balancing our masculine and feminine energy. Let's say hi to the folks before we get started. Facebook's starting to do something a little different with us, so that tells me that those numbers are actually going, superseding everything that Facebook is actually doing, and they're pushing us straight to the event pages. So that was the issue on last week when folks were complaining about not seeing the feed, because Facebook was actually deleting the feed from the actual profiles. Yeah, they send them straight to the event pages. So it's going beyond Facebook on it, so they're pushing it past Facebook. So we're already broadcasting like on YouTube and all that good stuff and all that, but Facebook is actually allowing folks off Facebook to see it from Facebook. So that's good stuff too. So we're talking about a little masculine energy and femininity.
Yeah.
So let's bring Brother Rahme'el in here one more time. Brother Rahme'el.
Greetings.
What's going on, brother?
Welcome back. Thanks for coming back this week.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Good stuff, man. We had had a couple of calls on you, man, and everyone had pulled out their notepads and
nothing, was it?
Nah. No. Actually, they were pulling out their notepads, man. I told them, come on back on Wednesday. We'll be back talking about the same thing. We'll talk about the balance of masculine and feminine energy. So they had some great things to say, and they said that, most important thing for me, it was that they actually learned something. They took something from it. So they were very much engaged, and it was much appreciated. And I encouraged them to come back and actually share their thoughts as well and add their voice to the conversation on it. So yeah, it's good stuff, real good stuff. So let's talk about it. Masculine and feminine energy, balancing it. What say you, Brother Rahme'el?
Well, it's interesting because many teachers, when we hear them talk, they'll speak of men learning to accept and be more in a feminine or things like that. And we see the book, Steve Harvey, Act Like a Woman, Like a Man, and things like that. And to me, those things are counterproductive into what actually is being expressed in that. To tell a man to accept or be more in his feminine is not really the direction you want to go. Everything that we do is from a perspective, right? Exactly. And if you're dealing with, a man, and as I spoke on last week, I don't see things as toxic. It's the lack of or absence of, right?
Right.
So there's no such thing to me as toxic masculinity, right? Or femininity. It's the lack of femininity or the lack of masculinity. And when you're a man, and when we understand what truly balancing the masculine and feminine is, then everything is governed by sex. This conversation that we're having right now is governed by sex, and when we understand that, then it goes much deeper than the lower nature or the mundane perspectives that we have about cultural norms for the masculine and feminine. Then we get into more of a spiritual understanding of what's necessary, which I'll explain later, because what we're talking about is really a spiritual issue for everyone. And if we don't address that, we can sit up here and talk about balancing the masculine and feminine until we blue in the face. But if we don't address the spiritual side of it, then they're really not going to be able to do it.
Can you define spirituality? Because it means very, very different things for very different people.
So, great question.
Before we do that, brother, let's hey Shann, let's welcome folks, and I see them commenting over there.
I'm sorry, I'm taking notes, but you're right. I told you.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I like that.
I'm gonna have questiones and things.
There it is.
But no, Mark is with us tonight, Martine, and Martine says, "Could you all or y'all, meaning Trent, not us? We ain't got nothing to do with how anything appears typed on the screen. So, can Trent type the correct spelling of the brother's name in the where she say in the feed, please and thank you." And so, Gentle Giant, he said the Gentle Giant is back. Okay,
what's up, Al? What's up, Al?
I think you got a full governor's pardon now. I'm just saying. Forget early parole. You got a whole pardon. And okay, Coach D, Mark is back on it. Is on his coaching tonight. He's got part 1 and part 2 already in here for us. Hey, Joker Dog, welcome back.
Okay.
Good stuff. We'll address that once we get to the spiritual side of things. I have something to add to that with the spiritual. Let Brother Rob break it down.
Let's do the definition, and then we'll go back to Mark's comment.
Okay. So, as I said, it's a great question, and it's hopefully, it's a question that actually will set us on the right path. Spirit, etymologically, comes from the word rit, which means breath. Rit, it means breath. So spirit simply means breath. It doesn't go past that, no matter what your spiritual system, religion. Spirit means breath. So when we're talking about spirituality, ality is dealing with the state of, practice of. So we're talking about breath, breathing. Jesus the Christ said, I will send to you a comforter in the Holy Spirit. Holy goes back to the word haleg, which means fire. And then spirit means breath. So he was saying that the comforter would be the fire breath, which is a meditative practice. So when we're talking about spirituality, and I say that, it's a great question, because ever since we entered or started to enter into the age of Aquarius, everyone jumped off of religion and started to say, I'm spiritual. And what they're talking about has nothing to do with spirituality. It has more to do with a new preference in the way of serving the divine creator, God, Jehovah, Allah, Jesus, whatever you want. That has more to do with their new preference in doing it, removing the clubism, right? But that's not spirituality. Spirituality is breath.
D?
I don't believe that it goes back to religion, because you can exist in the world without religion. Not everybody on our platform, not everybody that I work with believes in religion or believes in a God, or because I have a lot of indigenous people who have many gods. So for them, Mother Earth is completely different and is free of the creator is not a god. It's Mother Earth herself. So when it comes to spirituality, I respectfully am going to have to disagree with you on that. When it comes to religion,
But
I
you
don't believe
just said
religion is involved in it.
you just said what I said. You
No,
said that they have a belief system that goes deeper than the religion, and that's what I said. I said that they
Right.
define spirituality as separating themselves from the clubisms of Catholicism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Baptists, and they go into a different preference. And what you described is the preference that they go into, correct?
it existed before the Bible existed. It's not a
Right,
preference.
right, right.
It's
Well,
not a
I'm
preference.
not debating that. I'm not saying it did or it didn't. I'm only speaking of how people see it today, right? Because we
Right.
know that prior to religion, that everything has a base, right? And when we speak about religion, we're only speaking about a system or a practice that's
Mhm.
now governed by certain institutions,
Correct.
right?
Exactly.
Right.
All
Let's dig into the balancing and the balancing of our masculine and feminine energy. Now let's get to number one. How do we actually have harmony? How do we create harmony? For me personally, I do that by yoga. I center myself weekly with yoga. Sometimes a couple of times out of the week. Sometimes do it at the house. Then I go into yoga on Thursday. As far as centering ourselves, as far as let's kind of get back to the balancing of it and how do we actually balance the two into one.
Okay. So let's go to Mark's comments first. So Mark's
Okay.
his part one is everybody is born with both of these universal energies, meaning masculine and feminine. They don't have a gender inherently assigned to them, but humankind associates yin with the feminine, yang with the masculine.
Right.
And then part two, masculine is often viewed as bad and feminine is good. There is no good or bad here. Both energies make up the very essence of who you are for a reason. That feminine energy makes us softer.
That society says that. But we'll break it down. We have I've jotted down a couple of tidbits on how to have harmony within that and actually how to blend the two to become one. So we'll start at number one. How to create harmony. Number one, yoga.
Wait,
Yoga is
this
the
is
number
this is
one.
for you, right? I'm sorry.
I'm
These
sorry.
are these are the things that you do to create harmony personally.
This is for
Okay.
me personally. Yeah. Number one for me, my priority is yoga. And it's the primary goal of yoga is to bridge the gap between masculine and feminine. Am I correct, Rob?
Mm-hmm. It's
Okay.
yes,
Good.
and yes, and base.
Number
Yes.
two is meditation. I start my meditation off at 5:15 every single morning. 5:15. Number three is laughter. Number four, you have to let yourself be in a relationship. That is a great way to practice surrender and openness. I'm talking to the men. It's a great way to practice surrender and openness. Now, let me break this down for you guys a little bit. The reason why I chose yoga as the number one because yoga saved my life. When I was speaking to Rob earlier, I was telling him I became blind on the left side. Became blind, lost my sight and everything. I was doing yoga from a wheelchair, which I thought was acid. I thought it was crazy. I was like, I can't even move my left side. How am I going to do this? I resisted it and resisted it, but until I gave in to the breath that Rod's talking about, until I gave in to the breath, I started moving. I got my sight back. The yoga started. I was always meditating. I meditated for years, but when I aligned myself with myself, everything came to me. I didn't have to go to it. The peacefulness came within. Every part started moving. Every part started moving. So we'll go throughout the show and talk about the tidbits. But yeah, Rod, so what was your thoughts on that when I brought that up to you about the yoga and the meditation center? I know you do a lot of meditating.
You know, for me, I mean, I start my day off with meditation. You know, because it's about centering. I also work with my clients and with myself on walking around in a constant meditative state
Boom.
because, you know, meditation is all about the breath. It's learning how to control the breath, the spirit, right? And that's all, you know, we're talking about. And so when I'm starting my day, I'm doing visualizations or, just breathing techniques or, whatever it may be. But that helps me to balance and stay balanced, calm my temper, calm certain things, be in more control of those things, listen more, talk less, things like that, which is what balancing the masculine and feminine is in actuality.
Exactly. Break down the breath that you guys started to touch on, so these folks that won't be talking over these folks' heads, so they'll know exactly where we're coming from with that. I know exactly what you mean when you say the breath, and I know exactly where you're going at when you talk about meditation. Because, like I said, the only way I was able to center myself, I had to give into it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to give into it. I couldn't force it. And when I first started, I'm in a wheelchair. I'm thinking, this is crazy. These people are
Mm-hmm.
nuts. These people. But the moment I silenced my mind,
Mm-hmm.
the breath came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everything came. Everything that was supposed to come into me came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Everything. Got the sight back and everything. I was literally blind on the left side. Somebody had to feed me. I had to have someone feed me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
I didn't swipe a credit card to get that sight back.
A,
Not
a
one
lot,
time.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize how important breath is. Like, for instance, newborns.
Right.
Newborns, just putting them on their mother's chest when they're first born, they'll automatically, just from her breathing and her temperature, will automatically reflexively start crawling towards her to feed.
Mm.
And because we rush them so much, we don't get to see this amazing thing happen. And
Exactly.
you can, like, when Xavier's sick, I'll have him lay down with me, and I will regulate my breath to help him to breathe, to help him to calm himself. And
Exactly.
when you're able to breathe, you'll probably agree, becoming present in your mind and allowing other things to wash away is amazingly calming, especially if you're surrounded by chaos at times.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You want to
Yeah.
expound on that, Rob?
Well, most of our 95% of our bodily functions function without um, us being engaged with them, including our breath.
Any conscious effort, so to speak. Huh?
Right. And so we're out of control. Okay. You
Mm.
understand what I mean? We're out of control. And so is our environment. So is everything around us. It's out of control. And so what understanding meditation does, it brings you back into control by starting with the very thing, the most important thing in your life, which is breathing.
Exactly.
There's nothing more important in your life than breathing, because once you stop,
That's a
you're
wrap.
dead.
And here's the thing: it's funny that you guys mentioned breathing and breath, and we're talking about. This is how I'm going to cross it over into the spiritual side, right? So when a person has a stroke, that means that they're losing oxygen from their brain. I lost oxygen from my brain for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Mm.
Mm,
That means that the muscles stop. That means the nervous system stopped. Everything stopped. There was no oxygen to the brain. I lost that. Lost that. It closed off all channels from the muscles to the nerves and everything. That's why the hands stopped working. That's why the tongue stopped working. That's why the eye went blind. All to the left side. I lost that oxygen. But the moment I was able to center myself, all those channels started opening up again. It's almost like a highway. Think about it as a highway. When you have a congested freeway, Shannon, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. In Atlanta, where there's chaos, clogged up highways. If those things are clogged up, that off ramp is clogged up, nobody's going anywhere. They're sitting there. It's just like the brain. If part of that muscle is clogged up at the elbow, my fingers won't be able to talk to the brain. My brain won't be able to talk to the fingers
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, move, you're still working.
mm.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, from the spiritual perspective, right? Um, if I can have a brief moment for, just a small breakdown of how
Absolutely.
we got here, right? Because I always like to tell people, how did we get in this position? Kind of give a background of that, because this is all a spiritual issue. We're out of control, and that out of controlness that we're in, the state of being out of control, separates us from the divine.
Mm.
Right. And without coming back into control, then we can never truly have a connection with the divine. That's just how it works. That's why, Jesus the Christ, Isa or whatever someone was calling Yeshua ben Yosef said that I'm going to send you a comforter, right? But what happens is that on the spiritual level, none of these things exist. When we go back um, hundreds of thousands of years, none of these things exist. Millions of years, none of these things exist. There's a time period where we were so much more spiritual that these conversations would have not even been fathomable.
Right.
If you go back and you look at Hikupta, or what's now called ancient Egypt, you'll see that the men and women are depicted very much the same. The only thing that separates them is the men will have a beard. And that was a depiction of their spiritual nature. It wasn't a depiction of them physically. Although, when totally balanced, the similarities of masculine and feminine balance out also. You go back to the ancient Amexem or what we now call America, you'll see that in many of our tribes and things of this nature, we'll talk about, the people who come back with dual gender. We'll talk about these things. That has been co-opted in dealing with homosexuality, but it didn't. It actually was about understanding those who come back with an ascended spiritual nature and what they were here to do when we study a little bit deeper. And so as we split, as we move further and further away from our connection with the divine, we no longer had an asexual ability. And if a person does the studies, the research, you're going to find that a lot of things are clouded in mystery. A lot of things are, fairy tales and things of this nature, but you have to keep digging. If you want to
Right.
find the information, you actually have to look at what they're calling fairy tales. And then you have to go past that, and then you'll uncover what they're hiding, right? And you'll find that the original beings that they found and things like this were one sex, and they'll talk about it. There's science on it, all of these things, and you'll find that as creation went on, and we lost or disconnected from the divine, we lost that ability to be one sex, and then we split.
That is
And
deep.
this goes back into astrology and astronomy, which we don't have time to go that far in. But when that happened, we split so that then we would understand that we need each other.
One more
The
time for the people that didn't hear you in the back. You did what you
yeah,
need what?
we split so that we could see that we need each other.
There you go.
And
There you go.
and so that begins the spiritual journey. This is why Eve in the Biblios Helio text, the Bible, was associated with wisdom. And sexual relations were displayed as an Adam knew meaning knowledge. She was represented knowledge, right brain, creativity, wisdom, spiritual ascension. Adam knew Eve, evolution, the evolutionary process, the knowledge. Atom, ATOM. And so that began to move, show us what was going on, right? And how we had split at that point. But we needed to come back together. And now, so in the modern context, with us being so far disconnected, while at the same time going back into a time of coming back into connection with the divine, because everything goes into cycles. A day, a short day, is 2,156 years. A long day is 26,000 years. And so that's the cycle of astrology, though. And so as we enter this cycle, Aquarius, it represents us ascending up. We're going back up the ladder. So now we're starting to balance that. We're starting to understand these conversations are necessary because right now we're subjugating the right side, which is also representation of us subjugating the feminine that we all have, and the representation of the feminine in the third dimension, which is what we call the woman, the man with the womb, the woman.
We got not to cut you off, Rob. We got a couple people in there. These comments are piling up on us here. Let's get to him, bring him into the conversation.
Yeah. So Mark had a part 3. He said, gentler, kinder, nurturing, compassionate, and loving. When you embrace the masculine, you nurture qualities like leadership. Hold on. I think I messed up there. So continuing from part 2, his comment got broken up. He says, both energies make up the very essence of who you are. For a reason, that feminine energy makes us softer, gentler, kinder, nurturing, compassionate, and loving. When you embrace the masculine, you nurture qualities like leadership, action, logic, adventure, loyalty, confidence, focus, and efficiency. Okay.
Hey.
I might let you have that one tonight.
He's absolutely right about that one.
No, I don't. I think that's opinion.
Yeah,
that's opinion. Very much so. It's opinion. Martine was talking in regards to when we were talking about meditation and being in a meditative state. She says she's in a constant meditative state. She does breathing. With breathing and movements, and
very important.
Wants it to be quiet. Mark said he wants to give a head nod and a chest pound to the good brother and gas hashtag. Joker Dog said, question, Adam knew Eve was a reference for sex, and also many of the sexual issues may be a result of sin, gender issues, and identity issues.
Great question. Yes, Adam knew that. So if you read in the beginning, it never says they had sex, right? It tells you that Adam knew Eve and then produced children. Right, and there's a whole astrological issue here, right, when it's speaking about this, but that's how it's represented. Sin was the original name of the moon. It's not in Mesopotamia. Let me reference it there. So that's a whole nother thing. What we're calling sin, what we're calling those things, right? We have to separate dogma from truth. And so I caution everyone, when we start, looking at things necessarily as sin, intent is really the issue, right? Intent. And that creates the issue. Murder 1, murder 2, murder 3 is intent.
Yeah.
You can have sex with a woman and she can be your wife, she could be your girlfriend, she could be your daughter, intent. And that makes what that issue. The sex wasn't the issue. The circumstances. So would have to expand more on understanding what is the intent. What are we calling sin? What is that? But our misuse of sex further creates the spiritual disconnect. Again, we need each other.
Exactly. That takes me to my question. It takes me to my question. I jotted down here. I got a question for you ladies and gentlemen as well. I got a question there. 1 second. What is a wounded feminine energy? That's a question you got to do. You guys know?
Oh, I thought you were asking brother.
No, it was a wounded feminine energy. A wounded feminine energy. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was asking ladies.
Yes.
But a wounded feminine energy is when an authentic feminine essence is prevented from being fully expressed because of the wounds you carry from your past. This wounding can be from families, romantic partners, society, or any other situation in which we have felt unsafe or supported.
So why are we focusing on the feminine energy being wounded? Because that would apply to both, right? Men can be just as
correct. Correct.
Okay.
It's not
I
just
just wanna-
yes,
okay.
it's both. It's both because you know
Based on the definition that you're providing, that would
correct,
apply to both, right? Okay.
correct. That applies to both. The men are not excluded from this because we have if our makeup is correct, we have both in us.
Right.
So men can be wounded as well. Wouldn't you agree, Rob?
Well, most of us are.
Boom.
Which
That's
is
what I'm trying to
probably
get
why
to.
a lot of times some of that pain that gets inflicted on the feminine side occurs. But I have a question. So what do you mean? Give me an example when you just talked about the misuse of sex. Give me an example of a couple of examples of what that would look like.
So in the Bible, and most spiritual books, well, not most European centered spiritual books, such as
Mhm.
the Bible and even in the cultures of Islam, right? You'll have um, adultery is considered having sex with someone outside of your marriage
Mm-hmm.
when it literally has nothing to do with that. Nothing. Like absolutely, positively nothing by definition of adultery has any ties to the wife and the husband. Adultery simply means to have sex for the purpose of fun without the purpose of creating. All the person has to do is look at the etymology of adultery and they'll see that. And so, one of the occult secrets about sex is that Gabrielle was the angel or the angel of light, who was responsible for teaching the men and women about sex. And this was called the honeymoon. And this is when Gabrielle would take the newly married couple, separate them from everyone, and teach them about sex. And what happened is that we started to adulterate sex. And it stopped being about creating. It stopped being about that. And it became now for fun. And the problem with that is that anytime the masculine and feminine come together, you're creating every time. The question becomes, what are you creating? Because every time you come together, you're creating. And because of that, that continued our disconnect. We started to then produce fun children. We started to then produce a fun life, all disconnected from the divine. And here
D
we
look
are.
like she has a D look like she has a
You have
probing
a comment
question.
or question?
No, I'm just listening.
I have one. So what is so if we're going with the definition that adultery is about sex for fun, what is fornication?
Give me a second. I'll look because it's not on the top of my head, so I don't want to say it wrong.
Okay.
But I'll look and I'll tell you.
So the adultery being the sex within a legal binding marriage, right? And then fornication by our terms now being that it's prior to having that legal binding document with somebody, correct? I just want to make sure. So if
Today we look at fornication as what's funny is I haven't used these terms and how people use them in so long. Fornication is sex without being married, right? And then
right,
adultery is sex outside of your marriage, right? That's what they say today.
right.
But etymologically, let me see.
So pretty much what you're saying in your findings, these are overly used words that no one really knows what they mean.
Well, we're not that they don't know what they mean, because we very much know what they mean. We're being mistaught on purpose.
Right. I got you.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. She says, thanks,
Come on,
teacher.
Nurse.
Grand evening, good people, and awesome understanding. So, and I guess what I was trying to maybe get a better understanding of. So if adultery by the definition that she said is basically sex for fun, then how is fornication viewed? Because neither one of them are necessarily, if we're looking at it that the purpose is not for creating, right? So I'm assuming that fornication also is not necessarily, the purpose of it is not to create, is to creating as far as creating and bringing forth another life.
So the pi, which is Proto-Indo-European, the pi. And I'm not looking at the Sanskrit and things of this nature because we would have to go a lot further. But the pi, Proto-Indo-European, is gwr for fornication, Gwher, which means to heat and warm. And it took on the connotation of voluntary sex between unmarried men and women.
Voluntarily sex.
That's the connotation it takes on. But the root of it means to warm, to heat up.
You said to war?
Warm.
To warm.
W-H-A-R-M. W-A-R-M. W-A-R-M. My apologies. Yeah. So the words themselves, we're being given a definition. We're being given this information and we're not looking at it, right? So when we start talking about sex for fun, and see, here's the thing. When you go back into ancient cultures, this is not even to say that sex for fun was frowned upon. But even with sex for fun in ancient cultures, they knew that you were creating. So even the sex, if done correctly, is always fun. So you never need to have sex for fun. It's always fun.
Exactly.
So why would that be what's on the brain, right? That becomes the question. Why is that? Well, go ahead.
So are you saying that, like, because I'm not thinking that people and I could be wrong, that people are, I think people are attracted to each other, and things can happen, whether it's physical things can happen, sexual, all that kind of stuff. So I guess to me, I don't see right now the difference in how we're defining based on sex for fun, adultery, and fornication.
So fornication, let's just leave it as it's voluntary sex between an unwed couple.
Okay.
Unwed.
But they could both be the same, true? They're both
yes.
Sex for fun, right? Okay. Yes. That's all I'm getting to.
Yeah, okay. They both can be. But then we have, it becomes a very wide conversation. And even what you're saying, it's a very wide conversation because in ancient culture, sex was marriage. That's why it's called the consummation.
Right.
Here's where it gets.
Yeah.
Hold on. See, now it's heating up. See
here's where it gets spicy, folks. So we're gonna add to the Gumbo's part here because the actual viewers someone's saying they disagree and whatnot.
Yes.
So we're gonna stir this pot and bring these folks in real quick.
I knew Joker Dog was gonna come in there because I know him. He says, I disagree with the explanations. Biblically, all of this stuff is referred to as sin, which is an immoral act or missing the mark. And then Ursula says, we'll go back to that. Ursula says she has two questions. One, why is the very idea of intimacy fun? And two, how can we control the desire of fun sex? And so, let's do those. And Martine, I see yours. I'll get to yours as soon as we address those last two comments.
We're gonna go past the commercial, so we just
forget the break. Yeah, forget the break.
We're just gonna go into it. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what I was talking about. How bringing the conversation back to what it was. We always stressed on the platform research and overstand. Research and overstand. Just don't allow someone to tell you anything. Research and overstand.
And Martine did say, she said, we've been taught wrong in so many ways.
Absolutely.
I get that. I do.
Go ahead, brother.
A lot of things, but go ahead. So Joker Dog talked about the biblically, all of this stuff is referred to as sin.
So if we want to stay in the issue of the Bible, then that becomes a whole different conversation because once we start doing that, then we're talking about whether the Bible is correct. Okay, so then that becomes, now we got to question that. Is the Bible correct? But so let's just look at the words. I say this respectfully, but I'm very direct. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret how I talk. I don't care if a person agrees. Look it up. I don't want you to agree with me. Look it up. If I'm wrong, come back and show me where I'm wrong so that I can be educated, so you can help me. But if you look at the word sin in the original Greek language, it's not going to say what they taught you today, right? If you look at the word virgin didn't mean someone who had never had sex. It meant an unwed woman. That's all. So we have a whole issue here with accepting this information and moving on from it through thorough research. When you get into the original text and you start researching a little bit of that as much as we can, because the fragments of the Bible are scattered and is not conclusive. And then you have to deal with the issue that all the books, because everyone wants to say they're not Catholic, but they're using the Catholic book, because the Catholics are the one who took all the other books out and gave you the book, and now that's the one that you accept as if you're not Catholic. Well, you have to be Catholic because you're reading their book. It's their book. So it becomes, we have to question the whole thing when we talk about it. I know what they told you. I grew up as a Baptist, then Jehovah's Witness, and, studied them all, got it. And so I know that they teach us that, that sin is all these different things, but we're not questioning, we're not asking the right questions around that.
So let's pull them off the ledge. Let's pull them back off the ledge. We went deep. We went way deep. Let's pull them off the ledge for a second. Let's talk a little bit about the balancing of the masculine and feminine energy.
But we haven't gotten to. We still have Ursula's questions to answer before we go back.
That's fine. We're gonna pull off the ledge.
Was why is the very idea of intimacy fun? And then 2, how can we control the desire of fun sex?
So the last question is answers the first question. So let's deal with the last part of it, because that does go right back into what Brother Shann is saying, the balancing. Mm-hmm. Our issue is that we're out of control. Mm-hmm. And so everything we want is fun. We've lost the spiritual connection of everything. So we don't even understand how the womb works. 99% of women have no understanding of the real way their womb works. They don't, because they're not taught these. This isn't information that women are taught. It's like men aren't taught about our bodies. We just simply don't know. So because of that, all of our experience, become wrapped in trying to have fun and explore, because we really aren't given the information on what's really going on here. And so in ancient societies, they would start the process of procreating because they knew how to manifest through the woman's womb. That's why she was considered the representation of the divine on earth, because she was the closest that we've got, right? That's how they seen it. And they knew that in order to create, you had to tap into her, because she was the vessel that all spirits, all things come through, not just in human form. And I need y'all to understand that, not just in human form. When you understand the science of the number 9 and the womb, she is the gatekeeper. It's through her womb that everything is manifested, which is the reason why Hollywood targets her for confusion. And if you target her, you will confuse everything that comes out of her.
So let's break it down. Let's try to teach these folks how to get to the center. I know how to get to the center. You know how to get to the center. Let's explain to these folks the balance. Explain to them how we get to that balance. I started off with the yoga and the meditation. Mm-hmm. We could let's walk them into the balance, and where they won't be walking around here dumbfounded and accepting anything they hear or read. They have to get a clear understanding for themselves.
When we're talking about the balancing, one of the first things that I do is, I talk to my clients just about breathing deeply and exhaling slowly. That's literally the very first thing when I'm talking about breath. I'd be like, just breathe in, push all the air into your stomach,
Exactly.
and then exhale slow. At that point, I'm literally talking to you about controlling your breath, consciously deciding how you breathe. That's the first thing, right? Then we get into, depending on what's going on with them, we'll get into the fire breath. Okay, and that's a whole different breathing technique. Not going to go into it. We'll keep it simpler. The other breathing technique I teach is about it's the 4 7s. Inhale 7, hold 7, exhale 7, hold 7. Now, if you get into the sciences of these breaths, being able to do certain amounts of breaths per minute gets into your ability to connect to the divine and gets into your ability to manifest. When you can bring your breathing down to 3 breaths a minute for an hour, for about 50 minutes, then you're really tapping into your ability to manifest. When you can bring it down to 1 to 2 breaths a minute, then you're tapping into and reawakening the pineal gland and things like that. And now we're getting into really being able
going to a different realm at this point.
Right. So this is how we start centering. We breathe, we sit, we breathe. The reason that you see the Siddhartha Gautama and Buddha, and so on and so forth, sitting upright is because they were readying themselves for the Kundalini experience.
Exactly. And this is what I was talking about.
What experience? Wait, I'm sorry. What?
The Kundalini energy.
Oh,
Kundalini.
shoot. I thought you said something else. Never mind. I ain't even going to read it. I thought you said something else. I was like, wait a minute.
No, Shannon, leave that there. Leave that there. No. But this is what I love. I love when Dee brought this up about the balance of energies, because you have a lot of folks, man, talk about balancing themselves, truly don't know how to balance themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They truly do not know how to balance themselves. You could actually get out of any situation if you're centered properly.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
You can get out of any situation if you're centered properly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a witness to that. I am a complete witness, and a lot of people around me have been a witness to that. But you have to effectively know how to center yourself. So this is great information this brother's given, because a lot of folks say, yeah, I meditate. Yeah, what do you meditate about? Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. They talk about it, but they're not about their life. There's a whole different realm when you're seriously meditating and centering yourself the proper way. So different realm. Totally different realm.
You got some comments though here.
Okay.
We'll get. I'm going to read Martine's question, but I want to finish the rest of the comments. So Martine says, "What about certain cultures having or using concubines for the men, and also the practice of tantra?" And she says she didn't like the word sin at all. She says she doesn't like being taught to suppress desires. Hearing the word fornication makes me cringe. Now Joker Dog says, "I don't read Greek, Hebrew, or Arabic. I think should be Arabic. I think it's respectfully that it." Wait, you're moving too quick here. That it is unacceptable to think that people need to refer to the original text of any of these documents to understand them.
Right.
And then how can anyone truly have balance when he or she is excluding God out of their lives in a world that he made?
That's the whole point.
So let's get back to Martine's question first about certain cultures using or having or using concubines and the practice of tantra. Tantra.
Well, it's two different, completely two different questions. When you study ancient cultures, the first thing that we find, I don't know why the word just left. It's where the couples don't marry at all. Ancient cultures, in the very, very ancient cultures, did not marry.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot the word. It's a part of polygamy, but I can't think of the word. Then you have polygyny, which is when the women had multiple husbands. That predates men having multiple husbands.
Okay,
so women had multiple husbands first.
I like that.
There's a few places they still practice it. Mm-hmm.
Research polyandry.
And then when you get into the men, having multiple mistresses, that's more recent history. Cultures practiced it at one point because of men, there being a scarcity of men. That's where it starts coming around, right? And that had to do a lot with when men would go off to war, and but it wasn't remotely what we think of today, because we're so sex for fun that any mention of these things, we think, oh, everybody was having sex. That was not true. If I went to war and got killed, my brother would take on the responsibility of my lady and my children. He may never have sex with her, but it would be his responsibility, so that would be considered his wife. That doesn't mean they had sex. And so we took on her responsibility, because in those societies, they understood that there should be nobody single, because singleness breeds certain things within society that we don't have to get into. So they didn't allow it. So you always took responsibility. She could opt out and find another husband if she chose to, but the brother would first step up, right? So that was part of the practice. Then you go into the cultures where you start to see the subjugation of the womb. And when that subjugation happens, and when I say womb instead of woman, because I want to understand what we're doing. Actually, we're subjugating the womb. Okay. And when we started doing that, then you start seeing men having multiple mistresses, concubines, for multiple different reasons that had nothing to do with the original. It had to do with an out of control sexual nature in a lot of places. It had to do with the disrespect of the womb and the woman, thinking that she's inferior, which also goes back to the subjugation of the right hemisphere of our brain. Okay. So as we follow that, right, then as we follow that narrative, where intellect becomes higher than intuition, that same narrative you can follow through history to find as intellect becomes higher than intuition. Intuition is connected to woman. And as we started to disregard and relegate intuition, we disregarded and relegated woman.
There we go. Now I'm gonna pause you there right there, Brother Ron. I tried to explain to these folks that they should. Everyone that I actually texted, I don't do the group text because I want people group texting me, so I text individually, hundreds of people individually. Bring a notepad. You see what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, let's address Joker Dog's question of how can anyone truly have balance when he or she is excluding God out of their lives in a world that he made?
Before I do, because I'm not going to forget that question, I do want to answer the question about Tantra.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Because that was important.
Yes.
To what we're talking about. Again, Tantra today isn't taught. What's taught today is sexual positions. Just like yoga isn't taught, well, what's taught today is stretching.
Boom.
Those are two totally different things.
Boom.
Tantra, in its ancient purposes, was for the exact purpose of this conversation, teaching people how to balance the masculine and feminine, how to create. And Tantra also addressed the fact that the vaginal canal and a penis shaft was attached to organs inside of the body. So different positions would attack different organs in the body. So even today, when you're craving a certain position, it could be that you have an organ that needs attention, and it wants you to have sex this way in order to address that.
No, Eddie, hold. Okay, now.
That's why I like it. Look at my liver here.
We need a whole show on this. Wait a minute.
Sometime.
Thank you, Martin, for bringing this up.
Yeah, that's Tantra.
Okay.
That whole poster we see of, bending up one leg here, and that's not Tantra.
That's not it.
That's not Tantra.
Okay.
That's just some sexual positions.
And for the folks in the back, you guys have to understand that yoga is not about stretching. That's what they're saying in mainstream.
Right. Yoga means
now they're doing like stretch class. I had a friend over in Atlanta. She was like, "Oh, I'm going to stretch class like you." I said, "No, I don't stretch. That's not. I don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not what I do. I go to yoga to center. I don't do all that. No.
You are not a yogi. You are a contortionist. Those are
Boom.
two different things.
Boom.
Two totally
All
different.
right.
You are a contortionist, not a yogi.
Okay.
Boom.
Disrespectful
So
to the
let's
culture.
let's do
Exactly. She didn't understand how I was offended by that.
Yeah,
That's very disrespectful. No, we're not doing the same. We are not the
Okay.
same.
It take a lot to offend you, sir. You was not offended by somebody talking about you was stretching and not. Please move on. Let's answer
All right.
the viewer's question.
Go ahead.
But having balance and having how you can truly have balance while you're excluding God out of the equation.
You can't.
Okay.
You can't. And if you're saying that you're balanced and you're excluding God, you're not balanced at all. You're completely off.
Okay.
And again, I don't care how you define God. That ain't the thing, right? There's no balance without understanding the source. So call it what you want. If you don't understand that there's a source,
it's always going to go back to the source.
Yeah, you can't be. There's no balance.
Okay.
You can't. You can't just because the source is the balance. That is the balance itself.
Okay. So not Martine, but Ursula, I believe Ursula's responding to your comment, Martine, earlier about suppressing desires. And she says we got to get back to suppressing our desires to some extent. When we do that, we will find the universe, and how we align ourselves within it will change. She says we're not supposed to be being with all of those different spirits, allowing them into our temple. She said, this is my talk right here.
What I would ask that she do is remove the word suppress and instead insert the word control. Because we don't want to suppress anything. We're here to experience everything in a controlled fashion, and one that benefits the purpose of the soul.
Exactly.
And that is fun, that's exhilarating, that's spiritually ascending. All of those things happen when you learn how to have sex properly. It's nothing but fun. It's nothing but spiritual and fun at the same time.
Exactly. And it's honestly, it's not really physical.
Right.
It's physical, but it's not really physical.
And most won't accomplish it because it requires removing a lot of the pain that we have, a lot of the shame that we have, and that's both men and women. Women have a underdeveloped second chakra, which is a part of the reason why they can't orgasm. Men have an overdeveloped second chakra, which is why they orgasm at the site of an areola. And both of them, neither one with either one of those, and I'm speaking in general because I hope everybody knows that. Like,
hold on a second, bro. Hold on a second, brother. Rod. Let me. I'm gonna order up like 10,000 life vests for a lot of folks who drowning right now in this knowledge.
Right.
And come back next weekend. I'll make sure I have the life jackets for everybody who's drowning in this knowledge.
But that's the thing. We have to strip off some of the pain, the shame, all those things. And I did a lecture and a class on it, where I was talking to couples about how to connect, how to get into a meditative position, while the woman is on top of the man and the man's inserted inside of her and they're sinking their breaths. They're breathing.
Where have you been? Why were you not on our sex loving goop show?
Because I was not invited.
We need you to be on. We need to revisit the sex loving goop show. I think we need to do that. Okay.
So, when couples can connect that way, it's a whole different connection. When you can connect with your partner for real sexually, it changes the connection. And most of us have never experienced that. And that's just the truth. We haven't, because it's hard to find someone. Let me rephrase that, because we don't want to, I try to make sure I'm not speaking the negative. We have to search and allow that to come to us. And because our vibration is about fun, it's about all these other things, that's what we get. Our vibration, our mindset often isn't towards the spiritual aspect of a partnership. So we don't get that because
Okay.
the divine, the universe, Gia, whatever, answers. And the first law of Tahuti or Hermes Trismegistus, and is first all is mind. It starts here, and then that becomes
Yes.
our vibration.
Yes,
You know,
I definitely believe it starts. It's at least I know for
Yes.
me as a woman, it always starts at a mental point.
It
always.
should for everybody. It should for everyone.
No, well, let me say this. What I mean by that is that everything starts mentally. If you read the Bible,
Thank you.
how did
Yeah.
the divine create? It don't say that the divine moved at all. And John 1:1 tells us, in the beginning was the Word, and the
Right.
Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Was God.
And if you read Genesis 1:1 and 1 and 2, it says, and God said, let there be light. It didn't say he created by move. God, let there be light.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so if you understand even what Thoth, and you read the story of creation in ancient Egypt, Ptah, who is considered the creator, did the work of Thoth, which then becomes thought, because it was a thought before it was a manifestation. And so this is what we become. And so this is we're centered on fun. And so that's what we get.
Exactly.
We're not centered as much on spirituality, so that's not what we get. And when
So
we
it's just
connect in that way, then
it's
it's a
two
whole
after
different
the hour. We want to wrap this up for these guys. These guys went in. Man, this is I knew it was gonna go. I knew it was gonna go in that direction about balancing and centering and all that good stuff. But for me, well, let's get to the teachable moment real quick. Then actually, we could actually continue this stuff on and on because we could open up a plethora of information. You guys got to be willing to accept it and learn along the way.
Well,
It's a
I
whole
think
bunch of
not just accept it, but I think with anything, people need to research and learn for themselves.
Please,
Because
exactly,
please,
we are not the source of all knowledge or
right,
exactly.
and I
please.
think you and I had this conversation, Trent, before that this is all about what we have chosen to believe based on the things that we have
Thank you.
researched and learned and
Yep.
experienced in our own
Can
life.
I give some book recommendations for those who might care? Um, the so there's one book called how am I forgetting these book titles? Wonderful Egyptians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. And that's written by a sister. And it's written in 19, I want to say 23 or something like that.
Okay.
But that's going to talk about, it's by Drusilla Dungy Houston. And it talks about the spread of spiritual knowledge around the planet and, and things of this nature. One of my favorite books of all time. Just there's a book by Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall. It's a European guy who was a master mason. Let me see. It's called. Dang it. I don't know why these. Let me get it for you real quick.
And we can always post them on the conversation page as well. Once, if you want to give them to Trent.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
that's
do
cool.
that.
You absolutely can.
Let's get to those folks because they're actually coming in and supporting. They've been
I
sitting
know.
there.
Hey, Brendan, thanks for
The
joining
secret
us. I know
teachings
you
of
were
all
late.
ages.
Go back and watch the episodes. You missed a lot.
The secret teachings of all ages. That's what it's called. The
Teachings of
secret
all ages.
teachings of all ages by Manly P. Hall. And I'm going to stop at those two because here's the thing. When you read those books, I want everyone to get used to reading a book with a couple of tools around you so that you just stop reading, right? Because the word read actually means to understand. Most of
Yep.
us aren't reading. We're enunciating words in our head. We're not reading.
Right.
right? Read means to understand. Have a dictionary next to you when you're reading a book with the etymological key to it in it. And the etymological key is usually going to be either in the back of a dictionary, the front of the dictionary, or sometimes it'll be down the middle. But what you want to do is that when you're reading books and you come to those words that seem like, look them up. Because especially when you get into a lot of your secret teachings, your esoteric teachings, they spell it out in the words that they're using, but they speak to you based on where you're at. You always meet people where they're at. You don't meet them where you're at.
Right.
You meet them where they're at. So they'll say a word, you'll assume what it means because that's where you're at. Then the person who is a
Great point.
student will then look it up because that's where they're at. And
Great
they'll
point.
understand the differences, the nuances of the book in a different way. So always have a dictionary, have a yellow highlighter so that you can highlight your points. Write in the word definitions inside of the book, so that when you go back, that's how you learn, that's how you research. And I say that humbly because my mentor had to teach me that. I didn't know that we're not really taught have a dictionary. And if you want a good dictionary, get a dictionary that's written before 1953, before Merriam-Webster bought out all the dictionary companies. Webster's dictionaries are garbage. They're connotative. You want a dictionary that deals with denotation. Denotation is what it means. Connotation is how it's used. How it's used don't matter. It matters if you want to understand current, but when you want to understand the real, you get into denotation. What does it mean? Because then they can't trick you. That's why you hear me say mistress instead of wife. The word wife etymologically goes back to a word that means bitch. Literally.
Exactly.
Means what?
I'm glad you brought that up.
But wait,
it means
hold on.
bitch. It means bitch.
Oh.
That's why I say
mistress. You let him tell me the definition without you playing in the microphone? Good God.
That's why I say mistress.
So what does bitch mean?
That's you know what? Look at you. That is a great.
I mean, I walk around saying bitch all day, but I got 2 female dogs, so that's how I justify it.
Can you go do it for me and tell her what queen means?
It goes back to a dog, but it also goes back to a few other different things.
Okay, well,
look
it up. Back for a third time but I want you, when you come back for the third time, we're gonna talk about something I want to talk about. So we're gonna talk about the whole the sexual and the spiritual connection during sex. Yeah, we need to talk about all that.
Yeah, no problem. But that's how you research. Look, so get those books if you can. You can find them online. You can order them, or there's some PDF versions of them. Excuse me. You can also go to YouTube. I use YouTube when I'm a person who I loved audiobooks.
Yes, I do too.
You have a plethora of audiobooks on YouTube. And you can go there and just, and you can speed it up, slow it down on YouTube too. You can read it double time or have it, so, but that study that way. And that's going to answer most of your questions when you're reading something,
I'm gonna leave you guys with this this one tonight. Brother Rod, if you will, can you tell the folks who overuse the word queen?
So it's interesting. You have people who will, there's a lot of people who, when they talk about the word queen, it goes back to like whore or a loose woman, right? And when you get into etymology, and I say this because of the reason that Brother Trent is asking me to say it, etymology tells you to go to the root of the word so that you understand it, right? But you also got to understand culture. There's one language that it means like loose woman or whore, queen. Mm-hmm. But it actually in its etymology does, Brother Trent, go back to the wife of a king. But in the community, what's happened is that people have centered on that one, I think it's a Latin language, that it goes back to the word loose woman or whore in the Latin, but the Latin isn't the root. You see, Latin isn't the root. So when you get to the root, it means the wife of a queen, right? So that's what the word mistress is. What women really want to be called a mistress. That's what it means to be a wife. What you think is wife is actually mistress. You've been taught the reverse. The mistress means the master of the house.
But you think about it, you ever look at some of those old English movies and they called mistress, it was the lady of the house. You're right.
And so that means the ruler or the boss or whatever of the home, the one who kept all the concubines and all the, or just it meant what we would call the wife. Today they teach you that the mistress is a side woman, and they got you calling yourself a bitch.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
That's how
I said that to say that we'll jump on that bandwagon. There'll be 1,000 people on. We jump on it because everybody else is on it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks are read to understand, man. They do not read to understand.
Yeah.
They browse by. Oh yeah, that's. I guess that's what it means. Everybody's walking around the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's walking around the cloud.
Beautiful thing when you do the research. It's really
absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
It's a lot of words out there.
Let's get to the teachable moment real quick because it's 12 minutes after.
Well, but let me make sure I not because I get the hate mail when the comments aren't read. So real quick. So Joker Dog said maybe part of the issue of addressing balance is identifying the source. Yes, I would agree with that. When we talked about not suppressing, but saying instead of suppressing, saying controlling. Martine said that's why she chooses celibacy. It's sometimes painful to be that way, but I don't do sex for the sport of it, and I don't date for the sport of it either. Ursula, I'm sorry, darling, I can't read your comment. I think if you can go back and make sure it's a little bit more coherent for me, I'll be more than happy to. I can't make sense of it right now to read it the way you typed it. Martine says she misses these type of conversations. She says, thank you, brother. Thank you to all in the podcast. Great conversation. She definitely wants us to put the books on the conversation page. So we have to remember to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Teachable moment. Go, sir.
Teachable moment for me is going back to the balance. We have to get to the balance first before we even open up any book. Before we open a book, you have to be balanced. Make sure you're balanced. If you're not balanced, don't waste your time with it. Wait till you're able to send yourself the proper way to get understanding. Because the only way you're going to get some understanding on any of this is centering yourself the proper way. Brother Rock?
I would agree. You know, taking the time to be selfishly center yourself so that you can, you know, be there for everyone else. You know, when you're on a plane and it crashes, they tell you to put on your own mask first, even if you're a parent. And it's because you can't secure them if you haven't secured yourself. You're going to die out, you know, trying to save them. And so we really do have to get to a point. Meditation is key. I'll say this, if you're a woman and you're wondering why, you know, a lot of, you know, you may have different personality disorders and issues, anger, you know, it could come from having, you know, a certain amount of sexual partners that you haven't removed the energy. You know, so to understand that a man does leave his energy with you. You are a socket, not a plug. You're a depository of energy. And that becomes a part of, you know, so that can throw a woman off center. So women have to be careful. You have a great responsibility, you know, and with that responsibility, you want to be very, very careful with the men that you're allowing to be with you. And as men, we have to be better at our job of protecting and facilitating, you know, for our women. You know, we're way out of order with an expectation that we're supposed to be in order, and that's just not how it works. We cannot continue to teach our sons that their masculinity is attached to, you know, how many vaginal canals they stick their penis into. You know, we can't show them, you know, ways to be disrespectful, and we have to take the game out of it. We have to do that, you know, and we have to be more present. You know, our sons want us to talk to them. So we have to do a better job for the next generations of making sure that they are centered. And that means that we have to be centering ourselves as parents. Meditate. Look at books on meditation. Get one. Just simply get a book on meditation. But until then, start breathing in deeply. and then releasing the breath slow. That's an easy way to start.
Dee?
I have to go. Xavier has to go to bed.
I know we're late tonight. Thanks, Coach G. We'll see you next time.
Night.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Shannon?
My teachable moment is really developing those things that are going to bring harmony and balance. And then the other part I just got from what you just said, really just don't be a hoe as a female. Like, yeah, because that's a lot of purging and stuff that you're going to have to do. So Ursula, I'm with you on that one. But I do want to just wrap up and say, we talked a lot about spirituality and things of that nature. So I want to, I don't think any of us, we can't discount or dictate how any of us or any of you define or experiences your spirituality. It's a personal journey. So, if anything, whatever you've heard us talk about tonight from our guest or from myself or from Trent, make sure you take time to go research for yourself and get the knowledge and educate yourself, and don't just take what anybody says as gospel. So, and to
add to that, as far as with the folks, it gets kind of touchy when you talk on stuff on spirituality and stuff like that. Folks have to understand. You have to have a clear understanding when these mics have been open for a ton of years, and behind that comes a whole bunch of knowledge. It's totally, just like Shannon says, totally up to you to understand it. I don't expect for no one to actually agree with us or disagree with, whatever it is. That's why it's called a conversation gumbo pot. Add your spice to it, have a conversation, an adult conversation, without getting heated. But everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. If you disagree with something, just go and research it, understand it, center yourself before you come back, though.
Martine says, I'm up late and it's so worth it. Thank you, Martine. Thanks for hanging in
there.
Thank
you, Martine.
We're going to go ahead and leave because we're way past our time for tonight. But thank you to our special guest tonight. I can't wait for you to come back again. And Martine, we're going to get him talking about some tantra stuff. We're going to get into it because I know that's near and dear to your heart. Not mine, but your heart. I'm going to put it on her tonight. But thank you. So and don't forget to go over and listen to us on Apple on our podcast, and if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and we'll see everybody hopefully back on Sunday. Have a great week and be safe.
You guys be epic.
Thank you. Good night, guys. Bye.
Peace.
Conversations with Trent in conjunction with Taylor Kennedy Media and your radio network would like to thank you for calling in and listening to tonight's episode. We hope that tonight's conversation offended you just enough to turn your mirror inward to come back for more. So until next week's conversation, be epic.